Hey, I'm Missy.
I'm April.
And this is
SheelaNaGig.
Hey, everybody. Each week we present and explore our own SheelaNaGig, a woman whose strength and perseverance has led her to greatness, who inspires us. It could be somebody you've heard of, and we're just going to share a little bit more and give these ladies some light. But it could be somebody you've never heard of.
And should know about.
Yeah, that's true.
Definitely.
Yeah. And are you doing well? How are you?
I'm doing great.
Yeah.
How about you?
I know you got a lot on your plate right now.
Yeah, we're playing whack-a-mole juggle life.
Yeah.
Have you ever played that game?
Whack-a-mole. Yeah.
Whack-a-mole
juggle. Yeah, it's true. I like that. Yeah.
And the trick is not to hit yourself over the head while you're trying to whack-a-mole everything else.
Yes, indeed. We are very excited because we have a special guest today.
We love it.
We're super excited. And I just want to mention, because this is our third time we had to reschedule her, so we were really grateful.
Yes. 3 is a charm.
3 is a charm. And we are here today to introduce you to Fawn Brokaw Doyle. And I'm going to read her little bio to start with. We're going to be kind of official here.
Yes.
This is so exciting. Anyway, and I wish you could see what she was wearing. We'll get back to that, but she looks amazing. She's totally in a period costume right now, which is awesome. Okay, so by day, Fawn Brokaw Doyle is a design professional, wife, and mother. By night, she is a historian, genealogist, and author. Her debut fictional novel, Salt People of the Cloud Houses, is based on her 8th great-grandmother, Sarah Rapalje. Sarah was the first child of European heritage, born in New York in 1625. That's a long freaking time ago. The novel was published June 9th, 2025, so newly published. Congratulations. Very exciting. And not just that, it was actually published on the 400th anniversary of Sarah's birth.
Oh, wow.
This story is a coming of age for a frontier woman, but also for the city that would become New York City.
Nice.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. I can't wait to be able to ask Fawn about questions like, so when do you sleep?
Yeah, it's true, because like I said, she does many things. She has many balls in the air, so to speak. You're a mother, right, Fawn?
Yeah. Yep. I had a toddler. When I wrote this, he was a toddler. He's now 4 years old, but yeah, this will always be, I will be a toddler mom forever, having in this time of writing a book.
I know. And I didn't even say welcome. I should say welcome.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for having me on. I'm a huge fan of this show, and the work you guys do highlighting women that we should know from history. And it's so inspiring, and I'm honored to share my Sheela.
Thank you. We're so honored to have you. We really are. We're super excited.
We are.
I actually just also wanted to share a little something that you had said on Instagram. Why don't you go ahead and read that, April?
On Instagram, Fawn wrote, I've always had a writing habit. At the age of 5, my kindergarten teacher told me I'd be a writer. I completed 2 years of journalism in college before switching to sculpture and then industrial design. 10 plus years later, and my writing habit has had a resurgence. After I've had my son in 2021, writing has become the creative outlet I needed. Wow, I love that. Can I relate? I also had an early writing affection, and then it kind of went off a cliff for a while, and now I've resurrected that as well.
Yes.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
Yes. Yeah, it's funny. I have this little book of you fill it out when you're a kid, all the things you want to be. And I wanted to be a worder. It was W-R-I-T-E-R. I wanted to be a worder.
Oh, I love that.
Well, yes. Fawn is an official worder.
She is. Worder.
And you are going to share your amazing is it great-grandmother or great-great-grandmother?
She's my eighth.
It's eighth great-grandmother. Great-great-great-great-grandmother.
Back.
Yeah.
Was an amazing Sheela.
Yeah.
Yes. So wherever you want to start, and we're on the edge of our seats, so we're going to probably ask a lot of questions, and because obviously our listeners, I'm sure, will have a lot of questions too. And we do welcome your comments, your questions. So just dig in. Let's do it. Let's do it, Fawn. Share the Sheela.
So Sarah Rapalje she's a footnote in some history books. as the first child born in the colony of New Netherland. But for me, she's my eighth grade grandmother, but she was also this window into an entirely different conception of colonial America that I was unfamiliar with. I think most people think of Puritans and Pilgrims, and this was not that. And, a lot is recounted about our founding fathers, and founding mothers are not really discussed. And she's definitely a founding mother. So in telling her story, I'm going to just highlight a couple of the records that I found that were really intriguing, some objects that belong to her, and also family lore stories that I found that were passed down and, might be a little inflated, but there's usually a little grain of truth to those. So
yes.
Definitely,
that's storytelling, right?
Yeah, we love family lore.
My novel is historical fiction, so I took records and strung them together, made kind of plausible conclusions, but going through these records, you'll see where at some points they raise more questions than answers. So I found it really intriguing.
Can I ask you, Fawn, how did you obtain these records? Was that difficult?
No, because luckily since like 1975, I think, these records existed tucked away in a corner in the records office in Albany for hundreds of years. There was a fire and somehow they survived the fire, but they're in Dutch, in Old Dutch. So it's difficult for even a modern Dutch speaker to translate. But there was this man, Charles Gehring, who took over the translation in the mid-70s. So through the New Netherland Project, there's like 10,000 documents, and a lot of them are available online. So you can see the original, charred edges of this document, and then you can read the translation. So
that's freaking cool.
I can't believe this.
It's like time travel, but it's so funny too, because it's like a reality TV courtroom show because the issues that are brought forth in the court range from like injury of a goat to land patents. It's just the full gamut of life at that time. And so it was really remarkable to hear the people's voices from that time.
Absolutely. How very interesting.
That's amazing.
That's great. And obviously, these documents survived this fire. So this story needed to be told. Like this was it. You knew.
It's just such a rabbit hole. It's been so fun. I don't get sick of learning about it because there's so many good stories from this period. And, I grew up in New York State and I didn't know that it started as a Dutch colony. I don't know if a lot of people know that.
I grew up in New York State and no idea. I didn't know that either.
Where did you grow up, Fawn?
I grew up in Western New York, so the opposite end of the state from New York City, but it's really like countryside out here in between Buffalo and Rochester, almost to Pennsylvania. Yeah, I live in like Amish country, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So in some ways, my area hasn't changed from the 17th century either. So it's good research for what life was like back then. So
I know we keep interrupting you, but I just one more question.
Sure.
Your outfit is amazing. We're going to need a few things to post, like on our website and Instagram. First of all, a picture of you in that outfit for sure. Because tell us a little bit about what you're wearing. You're going to have to use your imagination here, but tell us a little bit about what you're wearing.
Okay, so the undergarment is called a chemise, and it's just a big, flowy, kind of white linen nightdress looking thing, like a nightgown. But this was like the underwear that got washed the most, it absorbs your sweat and everything, oils, body oils. And then on top of that, this is called the stays, which were like a precursor to a corset, but it
looks like a corset.
Yeah, it laces up the front. It's got these shoulder straps that also you can tie on. You can tie on a long sleeve if it's cold out. And it doesn't have boning. This is like 17th century shapewear. Gives you a little bit of structure, but not too much. It's very adjustable. So like, if you were pregnant or getting bigger, you can just adjust the laces.
Yeah, it looks more adjustable than a corset. It looks much more gentle than a corset.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's made
Yes.
out of like a stiff material, so it gives you a little bit of shape. And then I have petticoats underneath, which are just skirts, and then an apron on top. And then they would have worn like a head covering, like a coif or something that would keep your hair clean from like cooking oils or, whatever you
Right.
might be doing. So yeah.
Amazing. I love that you're just in character and you're just ready to take on Sarah Rapalje today. Yes.
Kind of method writing where I'm
Exactly. Method writing. It's true.
So before I dive into the records, I wanted to highlight where the story started for me. So it was 2017. My boyfriend of 13 years and I were in Tallulah Falls, Georgia for the solar eclipse.
Oh, wow.
And during the moment of totality, he turned to me and gave me a box and said, "Here, see if this fits." And it was his grandmother's wedding ring. And we got engaged, and it was this lovely moment. And then we went to leave. We were living in Philly at the time, a drive back from Georgia, and the traffic was insane. So we were stuck in the car. It was very anticlimactic to the engagement. We were stuck in the car for a long time. And that was when I first looked up my genealogy because I was just like wedding planning already and thinking like, should I change my name? Should I keep my last name? I kind of had a professional life established at that point, but I didn't know anything about my last name. So I decided to look it up. So that's what kind of sent me on this whole journey. And I found out Brokaw is a Walloon name. So the original immigrant was Brokaw Doyle, and he came to New York in 1675. So it was in the Brokaw lineage, the matrilineal line, that I found out I was related to the Rapaljes, who were the first Walloon family to immigrate to what's now New York State. So that's where it all began. And I just became so fascinated with this time period because doing genealogy research, it's hard to find much about women. You're lucky if you get a maiden name and anything beyond birth, marriage, and death.
They're often written out of history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in this time period, I felt like I got to know these ancestors because there are more records available. So I just became fascinated. And so that was like 7 years of research. And I realized that this anniversary was coming up of her birth, and also the founding of New York City is also having its 400th anniversary. So it was in 2023 that I started writing the book because the story was just kind of burning a hole through me at that point to tell. And I had to share it. So that's a little bit of the background on how I became interested in this.
Love that. That's a great story.
I'm gonna back up the story to give context of like why these people came to this country. So Sarah's father, Joris Rapalje, was born in Valenciennes, and her mother, Catalina Trico, was born in Priche, and those are both in northern France today. But at the time, that was all known as the Low Countries. So northern France, Belgium, the Netherlands, parts of Germany, and Luxembourg, they were all one region, and they were ruled by the Holy Roman Empire. So it would have been like Sarah's grandparents' lifetime. The Protestant Reformation happened and swept through Europe and really rooted in this area. And there was a change of kings in this empire, and the king had been kind of more open to letting them self-rule. And then his son was Catholic Spanish and just really clamped down on this region. People were forced to convert or be executed, basically.
Wow.
So he sent in a tribunal known as the Council of Blood with 10,000 soldiers and the Spanish Inquisition.
Did you say the Council of Blood?
Yeah. That's what it was nicknamed.
The Council of Blood. Wow.
Yeah.
That's your next book, right? The Council of Blood.
Yeah, this time period was really fascinating to me too. So yeah, there might be a story. So in this region, the 60,000 people fled and anywhere from 3,000 to 18,000 people were executed. So this started the 80 Years' War and the Dutch Revolt. So this, started in Sarah's grandparents' lifetime, but really affected her parents. There was a rebel faction that kind of took over the northern regions of what is now the Netherlands. It became the United Province of the Netherlands at that point. So that was the first time that was actually like a country. And they were very welcoming to refugees of all sorts. They had a lot of tolerance for all different religions, and it very much became an economic hub because all of these talented artisans and merchants were fleeing the south to the north. So it was kind of a boon for this new country. So then in 1602, the Dutch East India Company formed, and it was one of the first joint stock companies in the world. They would dominate the spice trade in Asia for 2 centuries. They sent Englishman Henry Hudson exploring to look for a faster path to the east for this trade. And he didn't go the way he was supposed to go. He ended up going west and finding the river valley that now bears his name, the Hudson River. And he was an Englishman, but he was hired by the Dutch. And the Dutch, then in 1621, the Dutch West India Company formed. So then that was focused on trade in the Western Hemisphere. And some Walloons that had fled the Low Countries in the South petitioned to start a Walloon homeland in this newly discovered area. And the Dutch West India Company was interested in the fur trade, and they needed boots on the ground to hold this land against the English, and the French were also very interested in the fur trade and just whatever economic possibilities were in this new world. So that's how the first settlers of New Netherland were actually French-speaking Walloons and not Dutch people.
It's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So in 1624, that's when Joris and Catalina left from Amsterdam. They were married 4 days before their ship left.
So this was their honeymoon.
Yes. They had a nice, 9-week sail. Yeah.
We're sure they went in first class.
Yes.
The suite. Not so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a rough honeymoon, kind of rough and ready. But I mean, there was also people married aboard the ship, so at least they got to have their first honeymoon night on land. I have a free prequel short story about this little, this period of time where her parents meet and decide to sail to the New World together. So that's available on my website.
Oh, cool.
Great.
And yeah.
Wait, what is your website? Say your website.
It's fawnbrokawdoyle.com.
We'll put that in the notes too, so you can check it out. All right.
Yeah. So
they're on their cruise. They're on their honeymoon cruise.
Yeah. And I think they left in January and arrived in March. So it was about 8 weeks on the water.
Wow.
Which was pretty good. Some took a lot longer, got into more trouble along the way. So then when they arrived, I think it was about 18 Walloon families and some Dutch soldiers on the ship. And the Dutch West India spread them out to the 4 corners of the colony to kind of be like, this is our land, this is our land, this is our land.
Sure.
And the area that covered was based on waterways. So the Delaware River area, the Hudson River area, the Connecticut River, and a little bit of Rhode Island. And so it wasn't like a block of land. It was kind of like fingers on a map where the waterways were that they were holding. So Joris and Catalina were sent up the Hudson River to what's now Albany. And they formed a fort there called Fort Orange. And they built dugout bark shelters, planted grain, established trade relations with the Mohicans and the Mohawks, were the tribes closest east and west, but also the Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, those are of the Haudenosaunee, or Iroquois Confederacy. And Sarah's mother's quoted that the natives came and made covenants of friendship, bringing great presents of beaver and other peltry, and desired that they might come and have constant free trade with them. They came daily with great multitudes of beaver. Like they were all about the beaver felt hats were a huge thing back then.
Well, I can imagine because it's cold there.
Yeah. I mean, look at Daniel Boone. But I love that there was this, sense of community and wanting to help each other and kindness and, graciousness that you don't always get to hear about, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean, it started it's really intimidating, I would think, too, when somebody comes and tries to be part of your land, something that you've cultivated, and suddenly there's, newcomers. So it's nice to hear that there was some good juju between them. Yeah.
Yeah, at least in the beginning. Well, it gets more
here we go. Here we go. Yeah, I know. It's always like that, right?
Yeah. So the following year, June 9th, 1625, Sarah is born at Fort Orange. And there was actually a historic marker in Albany. It's no longer standing. Somehow it disappeared during construction of the highways there, I think. I'm trying with the Historic Albany Foundation, we're trying to find it and preserve that. But it said, site of West India Company Colony, 1624. Here was born Sarah Rapalje, first white child in New York State, 1625. Fort stood southeast by the river. So that was just cool to have,
Yes, so cool.
There's photos of it. Yeah.
Wow, nice. At least you have the photos.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah. So then here's where things take a little left turn. The company had instructed the colonists and the fur traders to stay neutral in any wars between the native tribes because the Mohicans and the Mohawks were at war. And unfortunately, a small group of Dutchmen did not obey that, and they joined a Mohican raid against the Mohawks. About half of that company was killed, including their commander, and cannibalism was rumored. So things really took a hard turn there.
See what happens when you don't follow the rules?
Exactly. I know, they could have just all gotten along.
Yeah, it sounded like, the natives were doing a really good job of, extending the olive branch and trying to make it all work. And then, these dudes had to come in and kind of fuck it up.
The whole issue that keeps coming up in the colony is that there's this mutually beneficial trade that could be happening, but then there's also tensions of, who gets that trade. And there's always people jostling for more control.
Yeah. Gee, imagine that.
Exactly. Agreed.
Yeah. Some things don't change. No, so then also in the same year, 1626, there's a new director of the colony of New Netherland, Peter Minuit. He was actually a Walloon, so his name should actually be Pierre Minuit, more French, but he's also often called Peter Minuit. And he famously purchased Manhattan from the Lenape, and descendants of the Lenape reject sale as a Western interpretation of a deal meant to share land and have peaceful trade relations. And the goods being exchanged were trade and not payment. But the record of this is actually like a game of telephone. Like a ship came back and said, here's what's happening over there. And it said, it's called the Shaihan letter. So it says, they report our people are in good spirits and live in peace. The women have borne some children. They have purchased the island Manhats from the Indians for the value of 60 guilders. It is about 22,000 acres. And then it goes on to say just how many pelts that the ship was carrying, just 7,246 beaver, which is just mind-blowing.
Wow, that is mind-blowing. It's a lot of beaver. Wow.
Yeah. And that's just one ship. And, there would be several of those a year. So in any case of what the understanding was, this director, Minuit, he seemed to actually figure out how to regain that mutually beneficial agreement to share the land and trade. And he ordered all the settlers to concentrate their populations to lower Manhattan. So that became New Amsterdam. And so Joris and Catalina and little Sarah had to resettle, which must have been tough after, it was about 2.5, 3 years that they were, farming and, had built a house, even if it was just a dugout. Yeah. There's a lot of starting over and over and over in this time. So there's a bit of family lore, a story about Catalina and Pierre Minuit. One day, Catalina came home from the fields carrying her toddler, wailing with hunger. She arrived at her front door to find company men eating her last morsel of food, some Indian dumplings, or it was probably like a corn cake type thing. She confronted them, calling them thieves, and apparently one of these men was the new director, Minuit. He promised Catalina a milk cow and land to graze it in exchange for the food. So,
did he follow through with that?
I don't know.
Because that doesn't, that sounds like a really generous but yeah.
Yeah. Wow. There was
when you're starving in the moment, though, it doesn't sound
appealing. You could say anything.
Yeah.
Right? If you have a screaming, crying toddler that's hungry, it doesn't matter.
Even if it's a great deal, like I said, in the moment, that would suck. That would totally suck. Wow.
Yeah.
And we don't even know if he made good on it.
Yeah.
Wow.
They sent over 3 ships of livestock around this time. And apparently, I don't know how that went. I don't know if Catalina got her cow, but
Catalina got her cow.
That's so.
That's another book. Catalina gets her cow. It could be like a children's book.
Yeah. Okay, so the next record, I'm going to zoom forward 10 years. So Sarah's father made a deal for land rights across the river from Manhattan, so what is today Brooklyn, Long Island area.
It's where you're from, April.
Yeah, born in Brooklyn.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Brooklyn's very Dutch. There's a lot of Dutch history there.
Are you Dutch enough? No? Any Dutch in you? No.
Well, the street names are Dutch, a lot of them. But I'll get to that. So do you know the area that's the Wallabout? It's like the Brooklyn Navy Yard area.
The Brooklyn Navy Yard, yes.
Yeah. So that was where Sarah's father got 335 acres of land in this deal that he made with Kakapayans and Pewichas of the Kashikareran, which was part of the Canarsie tribe.
So Canarsie, that's an area, today. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So broadly in this Manhattan area, they're Lenape. The tribe is Lenape, but then there's all these smaller clans and bands and towns that they're identified as. So I bring up a lot of the names just because I don't think that's another part of history. I don't think it's taught enough. The Native Americans who
absolutely. Definitely. Yeah. And what we've kind of learned from doing a lot of our Sheelas and some Native history is that a lot of it wasn't written down. Because a lot of it was just like in storytelling and handed down. And, there's questions about if it's not written down, it's not legitimate, which is not really true per se. So it's interesting that you bring that up. And I have to say, too, I'm really impressed, Fawn, with all your pronunciations.
Yes.
I'm sure you had to look those up, but I know I'm really impressed with all your pronunciations.
Because I'm the enunciation slaughterer.
I always have phonics spellings in my notes. That's my thing. But otherwise, but very impressive.
I have practice.
You would have to because so much of this is Native history.
Yeah. In the book, I include a lot of French and Dutch words and Native American and Norwegian. Even there was supposedly 18 languages spoken in Manhattan in the early days. So it's like
18 languages. That's fascinating.
Yeah, so I try to represent that. And along with writing, I'm really into language and learning. I'm a dabbler. I pick up, different languages. So I was trying to learn Dutch, but I don't know if I'm hardly conversational in anything, but
Well, you have a lot of things on your plate. It's hard.
Yeah.
I can imagine it would take some time, it's hard. It's my sister is a linguist, and there's four of us. But we say that she got all the language prowess because she started speaking Chinese when she was 11 and speaks several Asian languages, and none of the rest of us really have any penchant for language. So, but it takes a lot of time and effort. I think she had more time when she was 11 than she would have it as an adult, So
yeah,
a little bit more of a sponge too.
So continuing with Native history as well, there's one more family lore story that Sarah, as a child, was ferried in a wash basin by her Native nursemaid across from Long Island to what was then called Nutten Island, but that's Governor's Island now. It was called Nutten Island because there was a lot of nut trees that grew there. And when the tide was low, it was actually shallow enough that you could, like an adult could walk across, but she was ferried in a little wash basin tub.
When you first said that,
to go forward.
I was a moment of wait, what's happening?
What's a ferry?
Okay.
Yeah, like a little boat. They made a wash basin into a little boat for her to carry her across.
So cute. I love that.
Yeah, so that they could go foraging on the island together. So, from these early records, I get the sense that they befriended their native neighbors and saw the value in learning from them, like where to forage, what crops did well, stuff like that, and the fur trade. So, yeah. So this native nursemaid in my story, her name is Wenji, but she was inspired by a real Lenape descendant named Nora Thompson Dean, and her spiritual name was G. Pakialexque. And she lived in the 20th century, but she was a big proponent of preserving and sharing Lenape culture. So somebody that, I could learn a lot from. You can listen to her talking. She was one of the last native speakers of the Lenape dialect. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, and that's like 300 years later, and she's had been continuing those traditions and knowledge. So, yeah, I tried to find representation and be faithful to that, but there's not that much of it in the records of the native perspective. So some of that kind of had to be the fiction part of historical fiction, is me imagining what that was like. And then another relationship that comes in at this time when Sarah's a girl, there was this newly arrived young English girl, the same age as Sarah. She had just been banished from the Puritan Massachusetts colony. Her name was Phoebe Seals. And so I conjecture that they were friends because later 3 of Sarah's children marry 3 of Phoebe's children, and her brother marries 1 of Phoebe's children. And I kind of imagine that Sarah, she's used to a mix of cultures, and there's another young girl her age that had arrived.
She's a badass. She's banished. I would definitely want to be friends with her.
And this just gives you a little insight into the difference between the English colony and the Dutch colony, was that Phoebe's experience. She immigrated when she was 4 years old with her father, her mother, and her little sister. But her mother and little sister died on the journey.
Sad.
It sounded like her father was just kind of a mess and couldn't take care of them. So he stole corn, fish, and clapboards, wood, like shingling, from their neighbors. So he was tried and convicted, and his estate forfeited. He was made to pay double restitution, whipped, bound, and then bound as a servant to this man named John Coggeshall, who was a merchant in Boston. So he was sentenced to be indentured for 3 years, but Phoebe was bound to that same man for 14 years.
My goodness.
Because they were basically like, her father's a ne'er-do-well. We're going to raise her, in an upright Christian home.
Right.
But what happened was there was this woman, Anne Hutchinson, that was their neighbor, and she was teaching She taught Bible, like they would go to church and then she would have women over and like discuss the sermon. And the men in power in Boston at this time began to be very threatened by her point of view. And she was tried as a heretic.
There she was. She was empowering through teaching. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Right? She had ideas.
Yeah.
What was she thinking? Oh my goodness.
So John Coggeshall, the man that Phoebe and her father were indentured to, he was a supporter of Anne Hutchinson. So basically, they all get banished. Anne Hutchinson is sent, had to walk pregnant in the winter. They ended up settling somewhere in Rhode Island, just trying to make their way. And then Phoebe and her father came to New Amsterdam at that point. So she was about 11 or 12 years old when she arrived. And I just imagine that, like, maybe Sarah and her, it was such a small town at this point, they must have crossed paths and became friends based on their later relations. So the next thing that happens, a major event in Sarah's life, when she's 14 years old, she gets married, which is very,
they married young.
very young.
Yeah.
And like even
too.
What's that?
I said their lives were shorter too. So, you know.
Yeah. And it was young even for standards.
Was it time? Was it considered young for that time? Okay.
Yeah. Like they usually would wait until 18.
Okay. So it was unusual.
It's very young.
Okay.
Yeah. But I imagine that because there's so many men in this colony, a lot of fur traders, trappers, merchants, that maybe this was a safe choice to make, you know, to have a husband at that young age.
Sure.
Also, her husband doesn't sound like a bad guy. His name's Hans Hansenbergen. He's Norwegian. He was a shipwright for the company. He was a carpenter, overseer of a tobacco bowery or farm. He kept a tap room, and apparently he was a large man who often broke up fights. So he was kind of comes through the records as like a pretty decent guy for the time.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah.
He was he much older than her? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Was he much older?
His birth date is kind of unverified, but it's thought that he was probably like 8 to 10 years older than her. So quite a bit older. But he was also their neighbor, so she's not far from her family. So that was another kind of silver lining to it.
Yeah.
Sure. And then one object still exists from her marriage, and it's a silver medallion that's about 2.5 inches in diameter. And it was probably a wedding gift.
Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. Can you send us a picture of that?
It's beautiful. Yeah,
definitely. We would love that. That is really cool.
It's amazing from so long ago. What a relic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's in the Brooklyn Museum archives. It's not on display, but that was where I found images of it. And on one side, it's engraved with a figure of a man and a woman getting married, and it's encircled with this inscription: "Behold, young woman, whom I love and no one else. Here is my faith, my heart, and my desire next to God." And then on the reverse side, it's basically like an Adam and Eve, like nude man and woman in a garden, and it's encircled with the phrase, "Behold, the creator of flesh and blood, created two of one." And it's set, later descendants set it into the top of this tankard, so like a silver handled drinking vessel. So it's in like the lid part. Yeah.
Oh,
and
I love that.
It's beautiful. I wish I could see it in real life. I tried to organize a special visit, but they were like, no, sorry.
That's a shame.
But at least there's photos online.
Yeah.
Then a little bit more family lore that kind of tells you Hans's personality and kind of life experience. While managing the tobacco bowery or the farm, Hans was chased by the Indians and took refuge up a tree, where they soon discovered him. Supposing his end was near, he commenced singing in a melodious voice, with which he was blessed, the hymn which commences, "In min grootst nood, O Heer," which is "In my greatest need, O Lord." His singing so charmed his pursuers that after listening for some time in delight, they left him unmolested and free to go on his way rejoicing.
Beautiful story. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Yes. And music is that unspoken language. It's the language that even if they couldn't understand the lyrics, it's like what everybody can understand. Oh, that's beautiful. You touched them. Yeah. That's great. That's a really good story.
Yeah, so it gives you a little bit of Sarah's experience, like having a Native nursemaid, kind of gives you some insight into how they felt about the Native Americans. Like, maybe Hans was kind of terrified of them because he was chased up a tree and threatened.
Right.
But, it gives a little bit of insight into that. And then, unfortunately, at this time, tensions were rising, and that experience of Hans getting chased up a tree was happening a lot more with settlers. So like the Dutch livestock would trample native cornfields, or, it was just kind of butting heads more and more.
Yeah.
And then there was a new director, Willem Kieft. And unfortunately, his actions only escalated tensions and culminated into a brutal war that lasted for 2 years. It was just kind of these like small incidents, and then it came to a point where war broke out. But during this time, Kieft formed the Council of 12 Men, which was the first democratically elected representative council in the colony. And Sarah's father was voted to serve on that council. And the majority of the council suggested patience and negotiation. 18 months later, Kieft was done with listening to them. He dissolved the council, and a fortnight later, he massacred 2 encampments of natives on Manhattan and across the river in New Jersey. And it was just, there's really brutal descriptions that I won't even go into, but, it was men, women, and children, like indiscriminate, awful.
It's terrible.
So a lot of the tribes in the area kind of were finding common cause to join together, because there was many more Native Americans than settlers at that point. So,
And I'll bet you if women were in charge in those days, there wouldn't have been as much conflict. I'm sorry, I just have to say that, honestly.
Yeah.
Better choices would have been made.
I imagine there being some tension in Sarah's household, because there was tension all over the colony. It was very split on whether, mostly men that thought we need to have a show of force and like show them we're in charge, and other people who were like, there are trade partners, there are neighbors, they surround us.
Not to mention it's their land, that's
we're on their land. So unfortunately, Hans was part of a petition to attack Native Americans on Long Island, a show of force. Yeah.
Oh, what happened? We thought he was a support bro. What happened?
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
So that backfires, and even more tribes ally against the Dutch. So it entirely went the opposite way that anyone intended, and it was just a terrible time. A lot of the colonists, their outland farms and boweries were burned, and at one point the settlers all had to gather inside the fort in makeshift huts, during like winter time, with like, the fields burned, so they don't have a lot of food. It was just a horrible time. And Sarah was pregnant with her 3rd child at this point. And Phoebe was pregnant with her 4th. And it was something that you would never read about that in a history book, like how many pregnant women had to shelter during a war, but like looking through the records, it was really apparent to me.
Wow.
And New Amsterdam's population plummeted from this, with people killed or returning to Europe. So that lasted for 2 years. Eventually, there was a treaty. And one ominous, like, side note, during the signing of the treaty, the director Kieft ordered the cannons to be shot off in like celebration, and one of them exploded and killed a man. So it's like,
oh no, dear.
Like what a bad omen for peace,
That really is a bad omen. Oh,
crazy. Yeah. So I kind of just imagine everyone was quite ornery at this time, like
sure.
they're hungry and like the war is over, but they're still starting over again, rebuilding and replanting. And there's a court record from this time where between Sarah's mother, Catalina, and a barber surgeon who was a newcomer to the area. His name was Paulus Vanderbeek. So there's court records of Catalina. It says, she came to the house of Master Hans and asked Master Paulus, why do you beat my daughter? He, Paulus, answered, you lie. And she replied, you lie like a villain and a dog. Master Paulus struck Catalina and then called her a whore and a seawant thief. A seawant was like wampum, like the currency of the colony.
Wow.
So yeah, I was like, wow. So she took him to court for slander, for defamation. So all of this came from records. And I love the insult of like, you lie like a villain and a dog.
I love that too. You lie like a villain and a dog.
Yeah. Yes. Another title.
It's true. You're right. You're right. It is. Maybe a song. Yeah. That's so good. But good for her. So did she win that case?
Yeah. So she brought him to court with 2 witnesses. And Paulus declared he knew nothing of Catalina that reflected against her honor or virtue, and cannot prove the slanderous remarks. For the blow struck, Paulus was ordered to pay 2 florins, and he was warned not to do so again on pain of severer punishment. So she did win. She got 2 florins, which wasn't a lot of money, but it's a little bit of a victory
that she won.
Yeah. And I imagine she probably really needed a win at that point because it was just such a low time in the colony.
Yeah.
And then fast forwarding again a few years, in 1648, Hans is pardoned for smuggling military guns on the grounds that he was pardoned because for 14 years he'd been a respectable citizen, and on condition that he begged pardon of God and the court. So,
right. Good.
So yeah, people are hustling back then. I don't know if he was, trying to make money smuggling. I think in the records it said that he didn't know that there were military guns in the ship that he had, but
it's a better answer.
But yeah. And then just a few years after that, Sarah gives birth to twins. One dies, and then around the same time, Hans dies.
No.
Yeah. So there's no records
Wait, so we up to 5 children though? 5 children, right? 3 children plus twins?
Well, one died.
Sorry, actually there's 7 at this point. Or actually,
oh my God. Okay, we missed a few. That's 7. Okay. That's okay. So 7 children and her husband dies, including a set of twins.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. What did Hans die of?
I don't know. It's seldom recorded how somebody died. Illness was rampant, like
prevalent,
epidemical diseases.
Yeah.
To where Holly just wasn't hard to.
I take a creative approach in the book, just, for a good story. But yeah, I really don't know. It could have been.
What did you say?
Could have been a hangnail that got infected. Well, spoiler alert, but it's tied to his smuggling activity.
Okay.
That kind of makes it a little interesting now, but yeah.
Because you're building a lot of intrigue for the book, and so we don't want to spoil it.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's true. I like that though. That's a good choice. That makes it a little more interesting for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So at this point, Hans had been granted land next to Joris's in what's now Brooklyn, across the river. And she permanently moves there. Her parents had sold their house on Manhattan, so they all move across the river. She sells her house, or what had been Hans' house, on Pearl Street in Lower Manhattan. And
so she at least had the support of her family then at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. I imagine she just wanted to be near to them.
Of course, yeah. 7 children, geez.
Yeah. And, on top of being a mother of a newborn, she's got to find ways to support this family. So I imagine around this time, she would have been, selling butter, selling eggs, like selling the produce of her farm.
Hustling.
And also, all women were taught basic sewing skills and needlework. And lace was really an important part of like status and fashion for men and women. There'd be like lace collars and cuffs. Women would have lace around their coifs. So I imagine that this might have been something that she started to produce to make other walloons that like her neighbors were involved in it. So in passementerie, they called it, which is like an early French early form of bobbin lace. And at this point where I had to tuck in another really intriguing figure from this time, who's Margaret Hardenbrock. She became the wealthiest she merchant in the area. At this point, though, she might have been somebody Sarah met at the market because she was just starting out. She had just come to the colony. She was an ambitious young woman with an unusual job. She was a debt collector for a well-to-do cousin in Amsterdam. She managed his New World dealings, and then she was also an agent for other merchants, trading small items such as pins, cooking oil, and vinegar in exchange for furs that she would ship back to Europe.
Good for her.
Yeah. She sounded like a real force to reckon with.
A savvy businesswoman. Yeah. That's awesome.
But I imagine at this time, going to the market in New Amsterdam, Sarah very likely would have run into her. So she becomes a side character in the story. She comes back a little later when she's more established merchant. But yeah, she was an extraordinary businesswoman. And she died the richest woman in New York, owning 52,000 acres of land along the Hudson River. Yeah, it's just
pretty shrewd.
There's a lot more to her story. Yeah.
There's a Sheela there too.
Right?
Yeah. That's
so back to Sarah's story. She remarries. She's 29 years old, and she marries a Dutchman named Tunis Heesbert Bogaert. He's a Dutch sailor who recently arrived in New Netherland. And the next court record that comes up is Sarah appeals to the court. This is actually one of the records that supports that she was the first child born in the colony, because it states Sarah Jorsey. So they sometimes call her Sarah Jorsey, which like her father's name.
Oh, okay.
So it was like a patronymic surname. It would be like son of your father.
Okay.
Or daughter of your father. So Sarah Jorsey, firstborn Christian daughter in New Netherland, widow of the deceased Hans Hansen, burdened with 7 young children, humbly and reverently shows how your honors have granted her. She just says that she has 400 acres. And I'll paraphrase the rest. Basically that her neighbors are mowing this patch of land next to her, and it's disturbing her. And even though she has 400 acres, she's asking for them to add this little patch to her patent because her neighbors are annoying her by mowing it. So, I mean, if you have 400, yeah. So if you have 400 acres, I think that was more of a personal issue than a practical issue.
It sounds like it. It sounds like it. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And she kind of lives 2 lives with the first husband and the second husband.
On that note, so you can find out more about Sarah and her new husband and her second life in the next episode. So thank you for listening, everybody. And until next time, thank you for listening. Thanks. Bring your comments, bring your questions. Thank you to Fawn.
Yes, thank you, Fawn.
This is fascinating. I'm ready for part 2. I'm very excited. And we will just say goodbye until next time. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Unabashed in your glow.